Good morning, everyone. If you're going to get something to eat or drink, please do it right away. I told you we were going to need some time to do this. So one of the questions, there's a bunch of seats here. So one of the questions that people have asked me over the years is, do I have to go to Greece to be able to appreciate the Bible? And the answer to that is obviously no. But if you talk to the people who went with me, I think that they will tell you that they have a much greater appreciation. It makes the Bible much more real. Now, obviously, nothing is exactly the same now as it was 2,000 years ago. I hope that makes sense to everybody. But this is an opportunity to be able to see where some of these things happened, to be able to hear the scriptures in each of the places that we went. And we attended every single place that St. Paul went to that is mentioned in the New Testament. And that's really what I'm going to show you pictures of. If you take a look at that, do you see that picture, Don? Your front page. I'm going to show you, explain a little bit more about that, but that's myself and Don Peterson. We have 4 people here from Glendale that came. It's really amazing that they drove 2 hours to see pictures of something they've already seen. Anyway, that street that you see there is the Via Egnatia, or the Egnatia Hodos. It's the Ignatian Way. It's one of the old Roman roads that happens to be in Philippi, and the whole theme of this trip was in the footsteps of St. Paul. And Don and I are walking on the very road that St. Paul would have walked on in the footsteps of St. Paul. That's why I included that on the first trip. Here are the people who came with me. Some of those names will be familiar to you. Some of those names are not familiar to you. But if you take a look at them, you can see that there's a heavy representation of people from Redeemer. When you basically guilted me into taking you since I'd taken the people from Glendale to these places. I guess that's long enough. Let's talk a little bit more. Greece is mentioned and figures prominently in the New Testament. If you read Acts 16 through 20, you are going to get the missionary journeys where St. Paul went to Greece. And also there's some other interesting ones, the epistles to Greece. 1st and 2nd Corinthians are obviously letters that were written to Greece. Philippians, another one, and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Written from Greece, we also have Luke. The Gospel of Luke, probably was written from Philippi. Okay? The book of Acts could very well have been done also from Greece. We're not exactly sure about that, but the epistle to Titus was. So these are some interesting things that tell you about the relationship of the country of Greece along with the Bible. So I'm going to do is go through this trip day by day with you. And these first few slides might seem a little bit weird to you, but it tells you that we had a lot of plane transfers. And we went overnight, so that was what we did is we arrived in Thessaloniki that day, and that was about all we did there. And then the third day we were in Thessaloniki. So just to show you where this is, Thessaloniki, or what we would call Thessalonica, is the second largest city in Greece. And because it is the second largest city, we attended that, or we flew into Thessaloniki. It's way up in this area. This is modern-day Turkey. Italy is over here, okay? And we stayed right there. I'm going to use the same map to show you the places that we went. First thing we did is we went down to the sea, and the greatest Greek, as far as they are concerned, is a guy by the name of Alexander. He was so good that they called him Great. He's Alexander the Great, and this is a statue of him. And to show you how big this is Myron right here. This was a great way to be able to see how it was that Alexander was so successful, and one of those is with lances and shields, and I have my two models there that were showing you just how tall those lances were and the shields that they hid behind, and you can see another picture of Alexander the Great behind them. From there, we went to the Archaeological Museum of Thessaloniki. There are no more ruins left in Thessaloniki from the time of St. Paul. But one of the things that we did is we would always have devotions every single day. And we were right in the steps of the museum before we went in. And you can see that I was having a devotion with everybody there before we went into this museum. I am not going to show you exhaustive pictures of this museum, other than to tell you that it's pretty fascinating. We spent a lot of time there, and we saw all kinds of things. For those of you who might be interested in building, or you can see that there was a Roman influence there, but they were also musicians, and this is one of the musical instruments that they recreated, and you can find in the museum. The Greeks also, and the Greek culture is reflected throughout the Bible. And when you see this passage from 1 Peter, it talks about receiving the crown of glory that will never fade away. This whole picture of a crown was one that was very common in the Greeks. It was common especially for their athletes, but also, as you can see, these two gold crowns that were found in burial, they were placed in some of the places where people were buried as a way to be able to ornament them. And you can see they are quite beautiful. Now I know, you take a look at that piece of rock and you say, what is that on there? It's all Greek to me. Well, our guide took me aside apart from our group. I don't know if the rest of you even know that she did this. And she showed me this inscription which was found, because in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 17, this is part of the portion where St. Paul is in Greece, there is this section where he says, when they heard this, the crowd and the city officials, you see how city officials is in Greek. This Greek of the New Testament is 2,000 years old. And to put this in perspective, how old is Shakespeare? 500. Okay, so the difference in language between the way you read Shakespeare and now is pretty significant. That's become the bane of every high school student to read Shakespearean English, right? At least I hope it's still the bane of every high school student. This is 2,000-year-old Greek. There was an inscription that they found there. This is in stone, and the word that is used there for city officials does not occur in Greek today. And what she showed me is that in this inscription, and that's Eleni's finger right there, and I will give it to you a little bit bigger, is a politarch. The politarch is city officials. And so this was a place where this particular word was found in an inscription, even though it is passed out of usage in modern-day Greek. It's a great word because one of the things that happens is when people criticize the Bible, they will criticize it based on every little thing they can. And the fact that this word was used in the Bible but was not used anywhere after that was a way that people were criticizing that this couldn't possibly be accurate. And here you see archaeological evidence that this particular word did exist. Any of you that went with me, did any of you even see this? Okay. There were some Roman influences there about 300 AD. This is right before the time of Constantine. And for those of you who went through the Nicene Creed Bible class, which I just finished, we talked about Constantine and the Council of Nicaea at 325. This is a little bit before that, when the rotunda of Galerius was built. There's a couple of other parts of it. We went up to the highest point in the city of Thessalonica and looked down, and you can see the same building there surrounded by modern buildings today. And by the way, you can see the ocean way there, right there up at the top. There's also a great arch which still exists from that time, and this is just a portion of it. We were unable to go to that as a group, but I think some of our people as individuals came and saw that. This thing is huge. It used to be an aqueduct. Okay. We also went to St. Sophia, or Hagia Sophia. The most familiar, most famous Hagia Sophia is not in Thessaloniki. It is in Istanbul. When Hagia Sophia, which was built by Constantine, was built, it was the largest Christian church in the world. That church still exists and has now been converted into a mosque. That shouldn't be a surprise when you're in Turkey, right? This Hagia Sophia used the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul as a model. I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures of that. We talked an awful lot about Orthodox Christianity. And one of the things that I told you is that Orthodox Christianity does not have a chancel with an altar on it the way we have. You notice that's their chancel. Do you see an altar? You do not. This is a curtain. And the elements for communion are consecrated behind this. I know we talked about this, but now you see a picture of it. I also want to point out to you the picture in the dome. One of the things that the Orthodox do, and I think some of the Catholics do way better than us Lutherans, is they ornament their churches. And if you look at these paintings, it's pretty amazing. This is the dome right overhead. And you can see how that is painted, and you have Jesus with a couple of the angels, the resurrected Jesus, up at the top. These are pretty amazing paintings, and everywhere you go, you find this in their churches. We also went to St. Demetrius Church, and you might say, what is St. Demetrius Church? Well, St. Demetrius is the patron saint of Thessaloniki. He was a Christian who was martyred. And so because of this, you know something about St. Demetrius?
Like, put Jesus around their church.
Because we're cheap. It's extraordinarily expensive, and these churches are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old, and over hundreds and hundreds of years, they have different people. They paid for the building. I mean, we're still paying for our church here, right? And so the thought of doing something like that doesn't seem to really fit. We talk more about the need to expand this building, and that's not the case with these churches that are 1,000 years old. Does that help? Now, if somebody wants to donate, the tens of thousands of dollars and hire a painter that's going to paint something like that, I think that we would probably consider that. We could set a new standard in the Wisconsin Synod. I like that. Okay. This is St. Demetrius. Interesting thing about this, they built it over a Roman bath. Okay, remember this, and we'll just talk about this quickly. People didn't have indoor plumbing. So if you wanted to take a bath or if you wanted to use a bathroom, you always used public facilities. Okay? And so when they talk about a Roman bath, this wasn't something that was for the wealthy people. This was for anybody that could afford to go in. Okay? Moving on. This is what the church looks like from the back. You get the same picture. What I'm really going to focus on is the painting up above the altar, because I think it's quite lovely. Yes, sir?
They had to pay for a bath at that time?
Well, in the 4th century.
Yeah, but everybody had to pay for it.
Yes.
Man, not bad. Stinky people.
There's a lot of perfume. Okay. If you look over the altar, this was the picture that you have there. This is a constant theme that you find in Greece. You have the angels, and who is the big figure? Mary. And you see Jesus, but if you look closely, you see Jesus with an adult head and a baby body. And the reason for this is it shows Mary as being the bearer of Jesus, but because Jesus is an adult, it's also showing him as her Savior. And so this is a common theme that you find in Greek churches. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look at some ruins. Those were active things. From here, we're going to go to Philippi. And you can see where Thessaloniki is, where we started. We're going out to Philippi and Kavala. I actually want to show you some other things here. This is Greece right here. Istanbul would be up here. Okay? And there's a little island here called Samothrace. Can you see that there? Okay? When Paul goes to Greece, he goes from Troas, which is not on here, but is somewhere in here. Troas is ancient Troy, as in Helen of Troy. Okay? He goes from Troy to Samothrace, and then from there he goes to Kavala or Neapolis, and we'll show you some pictures of that. From there, he goes inland to this city of Philippi, and that's his first major city in Greece and in Europe. Here in Acts chapter 16, we see what happens when he hits Philippi. First of all, you had to have a certain number of Jewish men to be able to have a synagogue. Philippi was a town that was retired Roman soldiers. And so there were not enough Jewish men for them to have a synagogue. Now, why is this important? Because when Paul goes to every new town, he goes to the synagogue first. These are people who already know the Bible. And he will reason with them, he will talk with them and talk about Jesus being the fulfillment of the Scriptures, and also that he's the Messiah and he's risen from the dead, until they throw him out. And that's what happens every single city that he goes to. In Philippi, the first place he goes to, there's no synagogue. So where does he go? On the Sabbath, which day of the week would this have been? Saturday. We went outside the city gate to the river, where we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered there. One of those listening was a woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira. Thyatira is one of the cities in Turkey that's not too far away from Troas. It's one of the cities mentioned in the 7 cities in Revelation. This is where Lydia is from. A dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira. By the way, if she sells purple cloth, what would that tell you about her? She's probably wealthy because purple cloth is expensive because the dye is expensive. She is a worshiper of God. We would call this the true God. Okay? The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. So, this is the place where he meets Lydia. Lydia is really the first convert from Europe. And we went there and had a worship service there at the river. And you can see that there. That's all of us kind of gathered around. And there's the same view. And actually, I have a little video for you. I hope the sound works here, Larry. Got to turn it up a little bit if you can. Oh my, I'm only hearing it over here. Okay, I'm sorry about that. We're not going to be able to hear that. But what we're doing is we're saying, I am trusting thee, Lord Jesus. And then I am preaching on that very section that I just talked about. And one of the things you'll see me do is read this and say they gathered at the river, and there's the river. I know you can see my lips moving, but there's no closed captioning. So anyway, we had a worship service there at the place where Lydia became the first European convert in Europe. And we'll move on. This is called the Ganges River in Philippi. We had expected and intended to have our worship service at this really lovely little place The other 2 times that Bonnie and I were there, that's where we had the worship service. There was actually people there worshiping. They were having baptisms there. And so that's why we went down a little bit. Our place was really way over here, and we had our worship service there. But afterwards, they had left, and so we had a group picture. And those are the people that attended. If you look in the background, you can see a building. I'm going to show you that building. That is a baptistry that was was built to honor Lydia. And it is quite a lovely building, and you can see Elaine and Becky and Candace there, okay? Because this is in Greece, this is all marble. Everything, everywhere you go, is marble, because that's their local building, okay? I could have shown you, we could have done a whole Bible class just on this. I'm not doing that. But I do want to show you a few things. There is the baptismal font in the middle of the octagonal building. It's only there for baptisms. And you'll notice this is all marble. And you'll notice the floor is all marble. Everything is marble. But there are paintings all over the place. There's Jesus being baptized. There's an amazing number of things. I had to cut some of these out or we were never going to finish. So I'm not going to show you a lot more. This is above the baptismal font. And this is Jesus being baptized. You can see John the Baptist here. And here are angels. Again, we don't have churches with anything like that. We also went into Philippi. I told you this was a Roman colony. And because they are a Roman colony and they were Romans that lived there, they have to have their entertainment. And so they have a huge theater, and this is what's left of the theater, and you can see my models there, and Holly and Anna and Bonnie in the middle of them. I went up to the very top step of this and took a picture down so you could see how big this is. And that's our group when I was at the very top of that. I think Eleni thought I was crazy because while she's talking, I climbed all the way to the top. You can see some of the old city walls, by the way, right here. Let's take a look at some more. What else do we know about Philippi? In Acts chapter 16, it says this: after they had been severely flogged, who's they? Anybody know? Paul and Silas, thank you. They were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. And upon receiving such orders, he put them into the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison doors flew open and everybody's chains came loose. And this is the traditional place where that happened, in Philippi. Okay, doesn't look like much, but these are ruins. I tried to show you some pictures of this. By the way, I told you about the Via Egnatia, the Via Hodos, or the Via Egnatia Hodos. This is, whoops, didn't want to do that. This is the old Roman road. And this was not true in this trip, but in previous trips, and I'll show you a picture of this, the road in Philippi was parallel to that. They were using the same exact placement for the road today that they made over 2,000 years ago. Okay? And that's Don and me walking down in Paul's footsteps again. This is what the site looks like. And the site, the road, is right here. This was the agora, or the marketplace. Today we would call it the mall. And this is where everybody went, and they had their shops there. And if you needed to hire a worker, you went to the agora. If you wanted to buy something, you went to the agora. If you had to have something fixed, you went to the agora. And this became the center of all of Philippi. Now, the one thing about Philippi, and you can't see this from this particular site, but by the way, all of these paving stones are all marble. This place is prone to earthquakes. And so if you look closely, and I pointed this out to a few of you when we were there, if you looked at this from the side, you can see it rolls like this because of the earthquakes. What had been completely flat now actually has some humps in it. This became also a place where churches were built after this became a bunch of Christians. And in fact, in the background, you can see some pillars. I'm going to show you something. These are older pictures because we did not go out onto the Agora when we were there. By the way, there's the old picture. See the street, which is no longer there. When we were there this time, the street was not there. This is the old Via Egnatia right here. Every time archaeology is done, one of the requirements for the group that does their digging is they have to do some reconstruction. And one of the reconstructions that they did is they put together an old church that was there. And so I took a picture of this because you see the scaffolding where they're taking all of these huge stones that had fallen down because of earthquakes, and they're putting them back so that when you go back to these places, you can see them. When we were there, we never got to go down in there, so we never got to go up close to this. But these things are absolutely huge. By the way, these great pillars, guess what they're made of? Marble. This is not the only story we have about Philippi. After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia. Now he's in Turkey here. Concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. From Troas, we talked about this, we put out to sea and sailed straight for Samothrace, that was the island I pointed out to you. The next day on to Neapolis. Neapolis is two Greek words which means new city. Today it's called Kavala. From there we traveled to Philippi, a Roman colony, and the leading city of that district in Macedonia. We stayed there several days. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to Neapolis or Kavala. And this is what it looks like. It's right on the sea. You can see how they would have landed there. The only thing that is really left there is that there is a church there that is built to register the fact that this is the first place that Paul set foot, that Christianity set foot in Europe. And that church looks like that. And I realized after I took this picture that there was a big truck that was right here in front of the most important thing that I was going to take a picture of, but that's okay, I've got a better picture of it for you. And they put this in front of the church. This is really quite lovely, and this is Paul, and he is someplace in Asia, Turkey, and he's seeing the vision of the man from Macedonia who is inviting him to come across on a boat to come over to Europe. And you see this looks a lot like Athens. And so we all went and saw this. This is going to happen a couple of times when we're in Greece, where they're taking note of these really historic things that happened in Greece. It is all mosaic. It's all little pieces of rock about that big. And the artists assemble these things. If we were standing there, I would be about this high. It's quite large. Okay. We moved on. The next day, we finished our time in Thessalonica, and now we're going to go down through the middle of the country to a place called Kalambaka. This is not a place that is on Paul's itinerary, but there's a place in between Kalambaka and Thessalonica that we do. And that place is called Berea, or Berea today. This is what it tells us. This is everything we know about Berea in the Bible. The Bereans were, by the way, one more thing. Paul had been in Thessalonica. He had been thrown out. They had to get him out in the middle of the night because they were going to take his life. Okay? And so he goes on to this town called Berea. Now, the Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians. How would you like that to be your epitaph for the rest of the world, right? They received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. Many of the Jews believed, as did also a number of prominent Greek women and many Greek men. Interesting, this is not all Jews. We're in Europe, and even though there are Jews there, we have Gentiles that are flocking to this message. Okay, there's nothing left in Berea of Paul's visit except for another mosaic. And there you have Paul preaching to the Macedonians. And the interesting thing about this is, see, he's got a scroll here, and he's got a scroll here, and see, he is taking this down, and, okay, that's an anachronism. They did not have books that looked like that. They were scrolls. But they're examining the scriptures to see if what Paul said was true. And they have a little park set aside just for this. Remember this picture, And this is what it looks like, the whole thing. And we had a group picture in this particular place. And can you guess what all of this is made out of? Marble. More marble. By the way, the reason that was interesting, and they all know this, I warned them, if we get water on this, it's like ice skating. So be very, very careful. And by the way, on this side, I didn't show you this. This is the same thing. Paul getting the vision of the man from Macedonia and inviting him over. Okay, let's move on. We came to Kalambaka, and this is not a Pauline place, but it is significant. We're going to go down to Delphi, which is also by no means a Pauline or Christian place, but we're going to talk about this. And while we're there, we went to the Icon Factory, and this is where we met Father Pefkis, and I think I showed this to all of you before. Father Pefkis, who is at work here, took his hat off and put it on me and gave it to me. And I said to his son, does he want this back? He said, no, he wants you to have it. I said, okay. So I think he'd be pleased to know that I not only have it, but I'm wearing it and I'm showing it to you, but it's too hot in here for me to keep it on. All right. And these were the icons that Bonnie and I bought. These were all hand-painted by Father Pefkis. And everybody who went there, just a second, Danny, everybody who went there was able to buy one of these if they wanted to. These are icons. We talked about this a little bit more when we talked about Orthodoxy. I don't really want to get into a lot of detail about this, but the reason we bought this is because of this says that Jesus is the life giver. This is Jesus Christ, who is, who was, who will be. And this is Greek for I am the light of the world, that portion. And it's pretty awesome painting. He also, for every single one of us that bought this, if he turned it over and I neglected to take a picture of that, he signed them, painted them, and actually had a little message that he put on the back of them. So they are incredibly beautiful. This is about that big. And this is what we did. Those of you who were there with me, how many of you actually bought icons? Could you raise your hand? Okay, if you look around you, you can see there's a lot of us. This is very unique art and a really special thing to be able to do. This thing that Jesus is doing with his hands is an Orthodox thing. It's a way they teach Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Old and New Testament, or dual nature of Christ, with the 3 and the 2. He's not giving the peace sign. Danny, what was your question?
You're traveling around in bus?
We had one bus that was our bus. We took the same bus everywhere. Our own bus driver, our own guide. Okay. From there we went to Kalambaka, where there are monasteries. They're Orthodox monasteries. These date back about 1,000 years. And they're incredibly beautiful. Just to give you an idea, those of you who attended the first visit, when we talked about this, I talked about steps, right? And why I was concerned about this. Here's the steps. Okay, so you get the general idea. And we did have an interesting thing happen that somebody lost their skirt, which we found, and when we got to the top of the lift, top of the steps, and I said, no, I'll do it. So I ran all the way back down the steps, found the skirt, and went all the way back up again. I'm not going to embarrass you and tell you it was them, that you dropped it, Steve. This is 2 of the monasteries that we were there. We went in them. We are not allowed to take pictures inside, so I can't show you the pictures, but they're pretty impressive. Larry was standing next to me when we were inside one of them, and while Eleni was talking in our ears, he kept saying to me, look at this saint, look at this one, look at this one, because he was so impressed with those, because they were showing how most of these saints died. And all of the walls are covered with paintings that talk about this. A few more pictures of this. This is when we were going up, and I did not take this picture. This is a picture straight down. You can see the steps. Okay? And there's Eleni at the top. our Greek guide, and we'll see more pictures of her. And when we got to the top, we took some pictures. Can you see the monastery here? Can you see that one there too? It's pretty impressive. If you like that picture, you're going to love this one. They were not. They were concrete. My thing with those is, and I told the group this, the first people who decide to build monasteries up there, you climb all the way to the top. There are no steps. So you're climbing up there different ways. You get to the top and go, I forgot my hammer. This is the city of Kalambaka here, and you can see this, one of the monasteries there. This is just really impressive. I know when we went there, the people who were coming had no idea what they were going to see, but I think everyone, having seen this, recognized why we would do this, because it was so impressive. Let's talk about Thermopylae. How many of you have seen the movie The 300? Raise your hand. This is Thermopylae, but this is the actual place that it happens. The Persians are invading, and he's facing a huge battle against large numbers. They finally excuse a lot of people, and they come down to 300 Spartans that are left, and they have one of their own that tells the Persians about the way around the pass, and they get slaughtered after they haul them up. This is a monument that is as special to them as like Gettysburg it would be for us. It is that special for them, and I wanted to be able to go there. It was also under construction. Can you see the fences? They were fixing some things up, so we couldn't take the pictures that I wanted to take. It's also kind of a cloudy day that day. And this is the king of Sparta who died. We are Spartans! If you saw the movie, you understand that. Okay. The next day we went to Delphi. Delphi was probably the most pagan place in Greece, which is really saying something. Okay? They considered it the belly button of the world, and I realized I did not put my belly button up there. I don't mean my belly button. I mean, they actually have a piece of concrete that looks like it. Well, it's an Audi, but it's a belly button, and they always look at that as the place. But this was the place where if kings were going to go to battle, they would come there and they would ask for a reading, and they would take animals and slaughter them and read their entrails, or they would have young virgins who would inhale gases that were coming up from the ground there, and then what they said was the fulfillment to the questions that was being asked. Okay? So Delphi was considered the religious center of Greece before Christianity came in. I'll show you some pictures of that. By the way, that next day we're also going to go from there all the way down to Olympia. We'll talk about that. But you'll notice that this is its own peninsula plus the top. This is called the Peloponnesus. There's one little isthmus. That's a great word. Fun word to say, isthmus. This is where Corinth is. And we'll talk about that as we get a little closer. This is what Delphi would have looked like before earthquakes and before the ruins, and that's Eleni holding this up. I'd like to point out that there is, you see the theater here? You can see that there was a huge temple here. There's a bunch of small temples, and when you came into this, you came in and you wound back and forth to come up all these different places, which is exactly what we still do today. This was the treasury of Athens. Each of the city-states would have their own places where they had to bring or give tribute. This is the one for Athens. How do we know that's from Athens? Not marble, because everybody has marble. Because it looks like a mini Parthenon when you look at it. Okay. And this is the temple where they did archaeology and found that there are gases that are coming up underneath this. We had a group picture there in front of it. Remember those pillars. This is from the top where you can see that theater, and the pillars were right over here. So you can see we had to climb up the hill. I'm going to show you some pictures too. Bonnie and I have been there 3 times. We have a favorite place to take a personal picture. I'm going to show you all 3 of the pictures. Oh, sorry, I forgot. There's also a track at the top where they could have Olympic Games. And I pasted 2 pictures together because there was no way to get the whole track there. This overlooks the Bay of Corinth, and this is an older picture, but right here, that's all olive trees. And we drove through those, and you have never seen this many olive trees before in your life. And they're all divided up because various different families own them, and olive oil is obviously one of the great things that they would sell to people. But that day there was rain. Can you see the rainbow? And this is the Bay of Corinth out here. This is our picture in 2006. You're going to see 2 things. Number 1, Bonnie does not age. And the other thing you're going to see is that I do. So there we were in 2006. And by the way, if you see the pillars there, same pillars. Okay, and here we were in 2015. There's the pillars behind us, and there's a little bit of the thing, the theater. And this year, it was a little cooler, but you can see the same pillars and all of this. That's our favorite place. So that we're kind of showing our pictures over the years. Again, her hair looks different, and that's it. All right, next. Between the Peloponnesus and the other thing, they finally built a bridge. In the past, the first time we went there, you had to take a ferry across. This bridge, called the Rio Antaran Bridge, is really quite impressive. I just thought it was fun to look at this. We're going to go on to Olympia. Olympia is the left circle. It is the start of the original Olympic Games. It goes back about 600-800 BC. Okay? The Olympics, just a little bit of history, were only Greeks. And then they stopped. And then in the late 19th century, they were started up again in Athens. Okay? The games that were started up in Athens are the same games that we have today. However, they do not use this original site. This is one of the places we thought I thought would be fun to go to because we all know about the Olympics. We have Winter Olympics coming up. By the way, somebody told me that when they were lighting the Olympic torch, they went to Olympia to start the travel of the torch. Okay. This is Olympia. This was a religious thing for them. This is the Temple of Hera. Does anybody know who Hera is? Hera is the wife of Zeus. And we have Philippion, which was named after Philip of Macedon. I have not mentioned his name, but he's very famous more for his son than for himself. He was a great warrior. He was famous for having lost an eye in battle, so he always had a patch. Looked like a pirate. But you know his son better. His son's name was Alexander the Great. Okay? And you can see that they've done a bunch of reconstruction at this place. Just so you see, and this is her talking to our group. Eleni's there on the left. And this was the track. And so we decided we were going to take a picture of all of us at the starting line. And there were actually a couple people who ran. I was not one of them. A couple of people who ran, and this is what the starting blocks look like. And you can see the 2 indentations. There's one here and there's one here. That's where you would put your toes in. When they ran this, they ran naked. Women were not allowed. But they had stands. I didn't take pictures of the stands. And this was the place where, like I said, the Olympics would go. Okay, one more example of the architecture there from ancient Olympia. And then from there we went to Nafplion. Nafplion has no cultural significance. It has no biblical significance, but it was a lovely place to stay the night before we went to Corinth. And when we went there, you can see it's on the bay there. And there were people that took these crazy pictures of each other standing on their balconies. We walked through the city streets the next day because we had some time to kill. But it really is quite a beautiful city, as you can tell by the bay. And you see that white building there is actually on a small island, and it is fortification because there was a time when those fortifications were necessary to prevent pirates or invading armies from coming in. And so this is, I couldn't pass up a picture like that. We also saw some incredible yachts there, unbelievable yachts. They were the size of battleships. I mean, that was just unbelievable. Okay, next we're going to do a Naphtalion. We're going to go to Corinth. And you see how close those circles were. So now you see why we stayed in Naphtalion. It was cheaper to stay there and much prettier. What do we know about Athens? After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. Oh, we're going to hit Corinth first, sorry. We did not do these in order. And so when I talk about this, if I get them mixed up, it's because I'm thinking of the order in the Bible, not the order we went in. He met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus. Pontus is also modern-day Turkey, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius, this is Emperor Claudius, had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Why did he do this? Claudius is the same one that unleashed a huge, he killed Christians left and right, let's put it that way. Okay? Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker as they were, they stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath, he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. I want you to remember this about the synagogue. Reasoned, by the way, that makes it sound like there was some kind of a logical argument. What it means is, and that's just, it's not a great translation. What it means is that he used the scriptures to show them how Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. Okay. So we went to Corinth. This is the Temple of Apollo in Corinth. It is quite impressive. It's also a reconstruction. But to give you an idea how big it is, can you see this guy here? While he's there, the Jews finally get upset at him. And they haul him in front of the court. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. Gallio was proconsul of Achaia. This is, we left the Peloponnesus, now we're up in Corinth, so we're in a different part of Greece called Achaia. The Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him into court. Now, I want you to remember this word court, because the Greek word for that is bema. Bema. And the court for them was very different than what court would be for us today. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. This is the Jews, okay? Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio said to the Jews, if you Jews are making a complaint about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it'd be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names in your own law, settle the matter yourselves. I will not be a judge of such things. So he had them ejected from the court. So what Gallio recognized is that when Paul was talking about the Old Testament scriptures and how Jesus is the fulfillment of them, he calls that nothing about words and names and your own law. He says, I'm not listening to this. This is crazy. Okay, so what do we learn about this court? The court, the bema, was public. It was on a raised platform. He would sit there, and the petitioners would come before him, and he would render judgments on the spot. Well, we have found that bema in Corinth, and we went there, and I took a picture of that. Sorry, we don't need to go through all that. And this is the group, and this is me judging them. Well, no. This is me explaining this to them. And if you can see this little sign right there, this is it right here. This is the bema. And so Gallio would have sat up here, and all the petitioners would have been down below. And this was one of the things, this was significant in Christian history because it made it possible for St. Paul to continue his work in Corinth without being put in jail again. And so this really was quite significant. Perhaps one of the most significant things that happens in Christianity until we have the rise of a Christian emperor, which is not for hundreds of years. Okay. This is kind of an interesting thing because let's go back. This is at the end of that street that I'm going to show you right there. Now, why is this important? These are all fountains, and they are beautiful things here. But you see this building up here. Please remember that building, because this was a main street in the city. And, by the way, Eleni did not know this. I talked to her about this. See that building? This is one thing that was found, and they did archaeology in that building. Do you know what those are? Menorahs. So, if you remember what the scripture said about Paul being thrown out of the synagogue, which was there, and going next door to be able to preach the gospel to a bunch of people in a house. And then the Jews, who don't like this next door, are so upset that they haul him down the street to the Bema to make their case against him. This is not even 100 yards. It's that close. Okay, all of these are places that you can see, and now all of this story makes a whole lot more sense because you've seen how these things could happen and in what circumstance they occur. Okay, there's one more thing that happened here, and this is one I had to remind Eleni about. Eleni was really good at all the Greek history. I kind of did all the religious part of that. I guess that's appropriate, right? But there's a guy by the name of Erastus that occurs in the Bible 3 times. Look at Acts 19. He sent 2 of his disciples, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia. Macedonia is where Thessaloniki is. While he stayed in the province of Asia a little longer, the province of Asia we call Turkey today. Erastus, who is the city's director of public works, so this is an important guy, and our brother Quartus send you their greetings. Paul's in Rome. And then in 2 Timothy 4, it says, Erastus stayed in Corinth, and I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. Well, the interesting thing about this is we don't know how common a name like this. By the way, what language is that come from? Is he Greek? That's a Roman name. You can tell by the U.S. ending. As they're doing excavations, and this was something I was talking about, you can see right in front of me there, can you see the letters? Well, maybe you need a better look at it. That's what it looks like, but you can't see it real well, so what I did is this. And you can actually make out, in Latin now, Erastus. And so there's an example of archaeology also showing something that occurs in the Bible. Was it the same guy? We don't really know that for sure. But it's interesting that it talks about Erastus being the director of public works. He also talks about him being in Corinth. And now we have an inscription which talks about the director of public works in Corinth. Is it the same guy? We don't know. But it is interesting to at least look at. Okay. You have a question, Glenn? No. Okay. All right. So here's another geographical thing. I told you about the isthmus, which is a little body of land. They used to land on one side. They would carry all of their stuff from the ship across land through a town called Corinth. And then they would go to the other side, and they load it back on another ship, and they'd sail to Rome because it was safer to do it that way. Well, back in the 19th century, the Greeks finally said, this is crazy for us to go all the way around. Let's build a canal. So they did. And this is what it looks like today. And we actually stood on a bridge just like that, all of us. We all ran out there and looked over the edge and saw, yep, that's a canal, and there's water in it, and then we went back to the bus. I don't remember exactly how many miles that is. Was it 4 miles? Do you remember that?
I think it's 4.
But it's pretty amazing. The question I have is, how big a ship did they build that for in the 19th century, and can ships still get through there today? The answer is yes, they can, but they're not big ships. But what's that?
It's also wind tunnel.
Yeah, it's very windy.
It's narrow and it's...
Yeah, it's very windy. But look what they cut through. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Okay, finally we're going to make it to Athens. Now, Athens is the capital of Greece. It was the capital of Greece for a long time. Amazing things happening there. And this is probably the most important one, and this is one that is significant for us. We find ourselves quoting this portion of Scripture over and over again. In Acts chapter 20 says, Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus. The Areopagus, Ares is Mars, Pagus is hill. It's Mars Hill or the Areopagus. And said, Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. This is really an interesting thing because Paul is before the movers and shakers of Athens, the largest city in Greece. These are people who are deeply into philosophy. They're deeply into new ideas. They really want to hear these things. And this is an older picture, but this is me standing on the Areopagus. Does anybody know what that is? That's the Acropolis upon which you find the Parthenon. They're right next to each other. But let's show you a little more modern picture. This is what the Areopagus looks like if you're looking down into ancient Athens. You could see these ruins from the top. And this is the old steps, which they now have blocked off. The first time I was there in 1999, I went up those steps, no problem. Coming down, I sat down and went down one step at a time, slid down, because they're, guess what they're made out of? Marble. And they are so smooth that even without water, you didn't want to do this. And this is why they blocked them off. They put around the edge here, they put a metal set of steps so that you could go up. By the way, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little sign there that says don't use it because they have a picture of a guy falling. So this is the Areopagus. And this was me gathering around with all of our people, and I read through that scriptures, plus there's a little bit more that I went into. And the interesting thing about this is all our people that you see, but there were a couple of people who were walking by that stopped to listen as I was reading that portion of scripture. They were obviously interested in that. This is on top of the Areopagus. It is not smooth. In fact, I urged a few people, if you have problems walking, please do not go up there because it is very difficult. You have to pick your way very carefully. And this is all jagged rock, but guess what it's made out of? Marble. It's a big hunk of jagged marble. And there's nothing smooth about it. It's really something. And this thing up here, that's the Acropolis. You're that close to the Parthenon.
Is there a quarry around there?
That occurs there naturally.
They got a lot of marble.
Yes, they do. There's a picture of me with the Acropolis behind me. You can see the rock. You see why I told people if you have a problem walking, don't go up there. The whole thing is like that. And, I thought you might want to have a little better view of this. So, come on. Oh, there's more than one way to do this. So now you get a view from there. I took a little video. There's the ruins of ancient Athens. You can see an old temple right up there, right here. So if you can imagine all the movers and shakers of Athens up there with Paul talking to them, and that's what they're looking down on.
They put that temple back up.
Yes.
There was a fallen.
That was reconstructed. And then I think there's one little path there along the edge which almost nobody used. But you can see the rock and how difficult that is. And then I think I tried to show you the Acropolis. You can see Kendra. There's the Acropolis right there. Oh boy, now I'm going to never get off of this. Oh, I did. Okay, so we had to have a picture there in front of it, and to show you that this is Greek, you see this little plaque here? That's the section I read to you, but it's put there so that people can see the significance of this for Christians in particular, and that's why we did the group shot. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the Acropolis. First of all, we talk about the Acropolis every city had an acropolis. Acropolis means the high part of the city. And it was the place that was most easily defended, so they usually put their most precious things at the top of the Acropolis. When you talk about the Acropolis, people always mean this particular one in Athens. And there, on the top of that, is what they held their most sacred place, the temple to Athena, after whom the city of Athens is named. And the Acropolis, one of the ancient wonders of the world, right? Okay, you can see how big that is. I warned everybody that was coming that you had to be able to walk well. These are some of the steps that we did also. And I put those out there so you realize I was not exaggerating this. Can you guess what they're made out of? More marble. Okay. This is from halfway up the Acropolis, and this is ancient, and it's still functioning today. In fact, when we were eating our final dinner, they were having a concert in there, and we could hear it. And I will show you some pictures of that too. And this is going up to the top. You can see some of our folks there. And Eleni is right there, if you can see her. She's explaining things about the building of the Acropolis. This is Mars Hill from the top of the Acropolis. So you get the other view of it. And this is where we were walking when I took those pictures. Okay?
So there's stairways to the top of that?
To the Acropolis? Yes.
That you can get to the top?
They are. Guess what they're made out of? Marble.
Wow. Jeez. Man, you had a lot of slaves.
2 times ago when I did this, there was a lady who had fallen, and she didn't want to get off the bus. And I said, Karen, you're not going to Athens and sitting in the bus. So I hauled her all the way up there in the rain and hauled her all the way back down. And I told Bonnie afterwards, I'm never doing that again. She's with Jesus right now, so I'm not trying to speak ill of her, but I wanted to give her that experience. I didn't want her to not experience this. This is the Erechtheum. This is the entrance part of the Acropolis. When you get to the top of the Acropolis, there's another building there. You can see it there and how beautiful it is. There's a story that these 5 women are supposed to be the fates, that they used 5 sisters as examples of that. These are not the originals. The originals are in one of the museums. They put these up there so that people could see them. Whenever you see the lighter colored rock, that's replacement. When you see the darker colored rock, that's original. I said 5, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 6 of them.
I'm not nitpicking.
No, that's fine. And that is the Parthenon today. Again, look at the light and the dark colored rocks. At the top of at this particular portion, there were all kinds of scenes. They are no longer there. They are in the British Museum. Because when the Brits came in the 19th century, they took them all down and exported them to England. The Greeks are still wanting to get them back, and without much success. Okay? But you can see how big this building is. If you figure this guy is 6 feet tall, you get a general idea. And I wanted to show you a picture of Eleni, or Eleni in English would be Helen, as like Helen of Troy. Okay? And there she is with Bonnie and me. I also want you to realize that we did more than just see rocks. We also ate. And we had very enjoyable, this is your basic Greek meal here. There's a Greek salad. There's another Greek meal. And we actually went one place, they gave us all shots of ouzo to start off with. This is ouzo.
Oh,
Okay?
what's ouzo?
Ouzo is a licorice-flavored liquor. Each night afterwards, I know I'm a little bit over, but I want to finish there. Hang on. Each night, I asked anybody if you wanted to have questions about the day, please meet with me at the bar. and I will explain that because it was a nice gathering place. And this was actually in Naphtalion, and you can see that most of the group decided to do that. I also told them, if I'm talking, you're buying. That worked better. And when we went there, we had all kinds of fun. And I thought you'd want to see what the other half is doing. The last night, we had a meal, and it was quite lovely. And at each of the tables, we had, I'm not going to show you the food because it was fantastic, and I forgot to take pictures of it. But the most important thing is after we did all of this, we had this as our view. And that's the end of the slides. Okay, we are 4 minutes over. I have to do liturgy for second service in 12 minutes. So if you ask a question, make it really quick. Anybody else have a question? Go.
My question was, in the museum, did you see examples of the paintings? Because these buildings were painted.
Yes.
Weren't they?
There were, but they are pretty abused by time. Yes. Anybody else? God's blessings to all of you. What's that, a trip like this? Oh.